The 8-person astronaut team stationed at the base is on a mission dubbed the Mars War Mission, anticipated to endure for a brief 6 months. Specially designed for the Martian weather, a vehicle navigates the vast, desolate expanse with astronauts Vincent and Rebecca aboard. As a colossal sandstorm looms ahead, Vincent and Rebecca brace themselves to navigate blindly until its passage. Reconnaissing the storm's direct trajectory toward their base, Rebecca notes that it will disrupt Kim's day, another astronaut on a mission with them, evoking a hint of apprehension in him. Despite Vincent's concern, Rebecca urges him to lighten up, emphasizing that a bit of dust won't harm anyone. Following the storm, Vincent and Rebecca discover Kim collecting samples. When Vincent invites her to join him, a dismissive Kim rejects him, even ignoring Captain Charles's request to return to the base. Rebecca prompts Vincent to share 10 things he will miss about Mars. Upon his return to Earth, his list predominantly revolves around Kim, eliciting a smile from Rebecca. As Kim boards the vehicle, Rebecca inquires if she found everything she was looking for, but the disgruntled woman remains negative. Kim expresses disappointment at not making any discoveries during her 6 months on the Red Planet, lamenting the perceived time constraint. Back in their base, patrol contact Vincent and asks him why he was running late and explains that he needed him there so they could help Richard restore the systems so they can have a stable connection with Aurora. The ship arrives to transport them back to Earth. Richard briefly manages to contact Aurora and explains that they had power outages due to the storm, while the Aurora team explained that they would be arriving in 19 hours. The power goes out again, disconnecting the call and putting the entire place into darkness. Finding something while researching the sample that he'd gotten, Marco requests to go back outside by using the false excuse that the gamma sensors were not responding from where he had placed them, telling Charles that he thinks that it might be damaged by the storm, telling him to hurry back because they were going to have a briefing. Charles allows him to leave, ordering him to take Richard along as the two are suited up and ready to leave. Vincent, Rebecca, and Kim walk in, and the very feisty scientist was upset that she was called back, even though the two men were about to leave inside the vehicle. Marco tells Richard to prep the equipment that they were going to add samples in, and explains that he hadn't told Charles that he'd found some kind of molecular anomaly yet. Vincent is set to work as soon as he's back in base, trying to mend the damaged transmission. He tries to apologize to Robert, one of his teammates, for making him miss his window to talk to his daughter back on Earth, both knowing that it was all Kim's fault. Venturing into another room, Vincent and Robert witness a heated argument between Kim and Charles after the captain departs. Kim accuses Marco of deception, delving into his private log, while Lauren attempts to intervene. Convinced Marco is hiding something, Kim believes the entire crew should be involved in the research. Examining a sample through a microscope, Ashley reveals Marco's groundbreaking discovery of life on the planet. Kim insists on collective involvement in the research, casting doubt on Marco's credibility. Now skeptical of Marco, he contacts the vehicle he and Richard had left in. And when he manages to reach Richard, he explains that Marco had gone out to the site. While Charles warns them to leave the place alone in return, a sudden sinkhole starts forming under Marco's feet as soon as he has the samples in his hand, and he disappears into the ground, panicking. Richard urgently calls for help, and when Charles and Lauren reach the site, a devastated Lauren offers to stay while the crew retrieves Marco's body. Returning to base, Charles and Richard find a shocked crew, except for Kim, who remains focused on the mission. The distraught Richard, blaming himself, turns to drinking. Connected with Mission Control, the crew is offered condolences for Marco's loss. Mission Control approves the retrieval mission, expressing support. Vincent and Charles set out for the accident site, attempting to contact Lauren without success. Upon their arrival, Lauren is nowhere to be found, and they assume she disobeyed orders by venturing into the hole without securing herself. Vincent descends and discovers an eerie sight, resembling threads or grotesque entities clinging to the hole's walls halfway down. Overwhelmed by a panic attack, Vincent nearly faints, necessitating his crew to urgently hoist him to the surface. Breathing heavily, Vincent reports glimpsing the bottom, but finding neither of their missing colleagues. As they puzzle over Lauren and Marco's whereabouts, Robert alerts the team to 2 sets of footprints heading back to base. Perplexed as to why they didn't use the rover, Charles instructs Kim to prepare for potential casualties. Richard and Kim ready the medical kit while monitoring Marco and Lauren's approach. Upon their arrival at the airlock, Richard is horrified when he removes Marco's helmet. His flesh appears eaten away, and exposed bones look charred. A distorted Marco, wielding a drill, attacks Richard, stabbing him in the abdomen. Richard triggers the emergency alert, but when Kim rushes in, she encounters another zombie-like creature, once Lauren. As per control room updates, Richard attempts to warn the team at the base of the impending danger, but succumbs to his severe wound. Kim valiantly fights the zombies, urging Vincent to stay outside. Charles enters the base and finds Kim panicking, and she shows them what had become of their friends, telling her that he would buy her some time until she suits up. Charles tries to hold off the door while Marco smashes the glass once in her suit. Kim hurries outside, but Charles is stabbed in the chest while trying to follow her. And once Charles makes it out to Kim, damages the door so that the creatures don't follow them. Carrying Charles, the team heads to the other dome so they can reach the equipment that they need to save the man's life. And as they lay him down on one of the tables, Kim notices that there wasn't a lot of blood, and there needed to be. And the area around the wound seems to be turning black, almost as if he was turning into a zombie, unable to control himself. Charles attacks Robert, grabbing his throat, but the rest of the team holds him back. Scared that Charles might come back from the dead, Kim ties both his hands to the table, and Robert was traumatized by everything that he'd seen and the continuous losses that they've experienced, telling Vincent that he just wants to go home. Suddenly they hear the alarms blaring and find out from the cameras around the camp that the zombies have managed to blow up the reinforced steel and were now on the loose. The survivors hear banging on the dome door. With no alternative, Vincent suggests using air ducts to reconnect with the base and inform Aurora. In the lab, Rebecca discovers bacteria in Charles's infected wounds, and they experiment with antibiotics. Though successful initially, they realize the bacteria is developing resistance. Kim and Robert trap a zombie in a pressurized chamber and release antibiotics as a gas. However, Rebecca observes the bacteria regaining strength. Vincent attempts to contact Aurora, but power issues hinder him. The zombie Richard attacks Vincent, trying to pull the oxygen supply from his suits, firing him off. Vincent rushes back through the tunnels to the dome, urgently shouting through the comms to open the seal while donning his mask. The seal opens, triggering a high alert status for the dome. As Vincent climbs out, Richard follows, attempting to grasp his leg. Kim rushes to the lab, hurling antibiotics jars at Richard's face and then climbing out. The zombie charges at Kim, bringing her down, but she manages to get up. Trying to exit the lab, Robert, in fear, locks her inside to keep the zombie away, leaving Kim behind. He follows Vincent and Rebecca, who get stabbed by the zombie left in the decompression chamber, heading to one of the vehicles. Deciding to reach the landing area and wait for Aurora, their vehicle halts due to a power shortage. Vincent suggests returning to patch up Rebecca, but Robert opposes, suggesting she might be infected and advocating leaving her behind. Panicking, Rebecca hints that she may not be the only one infected, urging Robert to expose his neck. Frightened, Robert proposes going to the site, as the fully charged vehicle they left there is their best option. The team heads to the rover, and upon arrival, Robert volunteers to retrieve the vehicle. He contacts Vincent, insisting he come alone, revealing Rebecca's infection. Vincent warns the team to return immediately, but Robert refuses. Vincent tries to catch up with Robert, but he starts the engine and drives off. Returning to the rover, Vincent and Rebecca use the last of their power to drive into an oncoming storm to hide their tracks from pursuing zombies. The next day, Vincent wakes up alone, realizing Rebecca left him, fearing she might harm him. Vincent follows her tracks and finds her nearby. When he catches up, She warns him of her inability to control the change and tells him to stay away. He tries to grab her, but Rebecca refuses, removes her helmet, exposing herself to the air, and succumbs to the lack of oxygen and pressure. Devastated, Vincent weeps, but suddenly, Rebecca turns into a zombie, attempting to attack him. Overpowering her, Vincent holds her down and smashes her skull with a rock. Vincent walks the rest of the way to the landing site, getting transmissions from the Aurora team, informing the crew down on Mars that they've arrived, noticing the zombies making their way to the ship. Vincent tries to use his comm to tell them to keep their doors closed, but he was unable to connect when he listens and wants to ward them. Vincent can hear the painful screams of his colleagues being murdered, and when he arrives, all he can see are dead bodies lying all over the place and having no other choice but to save himself. Entering the ship, he closes the door behind him. In the control center, he discovers Robert sitting on the pilot's chair. Vincent refuses to let Robert take the disease back to Earth, fights him, and momentarily disorients him. Robert manages to launch the ship, flying into space. Vincent summons his strength to beat zombie Robert unconscious and ejects his body out of the ship. A droplet of infected blood lands on Vincent's face, realizing he might be infected too. He sends a message to Mission Control, explaining the events on Mars and his condition. Vincent informs them that he doesn't have enough fuel for the rendezvous, but has supplies to wait for a rescue if they consider him safe. Acknowledging the possibility of infection, he mentions having enough fuel to burn up in the atmosphere, ensuring a swift death. After 15 minutes, Vincent awaits a response while floating alone in space, concluding today's harrowing tale.